there will be government failure, then it is the relative importance. Do you think that the market failure will have more significant impact than the government failure? For example, if you did not have this financial crisis that we are experiencing now since 2007, it is a market failure. So do you think that if the government had more control over these banks, investment banks, and so on, which now they're proposing now, like globally, now they're going to control these banks. They're trying to separate the retail banks and the investment banks. So in a way, you are allowing the government more power. So if this sort of power was there in the hands of the government, like 10 years or 20 years ago, do you think that a similar thing would have happened? We would have encountered this type of prolonged recession. Then many people say that, well, possibly allowing the state to have some power, some regulatory power or controlling power would have allowed us to escape or to overcome this sort of, or could have prevented this type of financial crisis. Okay? So the consequence of the market failure could be quite significant, even if in comparison to the state. Okay? So therefore, when the government corrects the market failures, yes, there could be some government failure, but the impact of those government failure could be lesser than the market failure. So here the government can, let's say, overcome the coordination failure. I talked about it, how the government can help in coordinating different agents. I talked about the multiple equilibria, and when each agents, if they don't believe each other, if the agents they don't trust each other, then the government can have a role of coordinating between these agents, and therefore the market can move to a higher level of equilibrium. So the government can address this coordination failure by intervention. The government can provide the environmental protection, and also in some countries the government can provide these minimum wage policies in the monopsony labor market. Okay? For example, even if it is not monopsony, for example, let's say the rural economy, where you have got a huge amount of surplus labor. So if you've got a huge amount of surplus labor, what is their opportunity cost? Their opportunity cost is zero, right? Because if they're not employed in agriculture, they won't earn anything. So if I know that your opportunity cost is zero, then I'll ask you, will you work for me for £1? You have to say yes, because £1 is greater than £0. So I know your opportunity cost very well. But the £1 is not a living wage. It's not a minimum wage. So if you leave everything to the market will always equate your, will try to assess your opportunity cost, will try to assess your marginal productivity and so on. But if you base it on this market mechanism like the marginal productivity of labor or opportunity cost, then the wage that you get will be very minimum. Okay? So there is exploitation and so on. So therefore, some sort of government intervention is needed in those markets, basically. Okay? And also, the state should provide this institutional and the legal environment in which the market can flourish. For example, the property right. Okay? Like to create a future-oriented market. Okay? So because in the absence of these institutions, the legal environment, the market cannot function. So market cannot take care of themselves. So the intellectual property right is one area which can ensure, well, which can protect the investment. And also, if you have got the legal environment, then many people will invest in research and development to promote the future market. So we want to have this future-oriented institution that they will send a signal to the market that yes, if you do this, in future you'll get the return out of it. Okay? So that sort of commitment or should be there, and it should be provided by the state. And of course, we know the macroeconomic stability, like the low inflation and so on, balance of payment, and all sorts of things. This should be also role of the state. Okay, but then if you rely on the market, and if you say that if you rely on the state, and if you say that the state should perform all these duties under the new consensus or whatever you call it, or consensus plus, you can say, then we know that without any enabling environment and the transparency, there will be a rent seeking. That's the most important problem with the state. That if you don't have the transparency in the system, then there will be rent seeking amongst the involved in running the business on behalf of the government. So this rent-seeking behavior of the government can lead to inefficiencies, and also it will affect the functioning of the economy. It will not only affect the state, these rent-seeking will affect the market as well, okay, the private farms as well. And ultimately it can affect the industrialization process in the developing countries. So, because the rent-seeking is, again, it is an inefficiency, it is a leakage, because there is no production is taking place against this rent. So therefore, whether you call it kickbacks, bribes, or whatever, so all these things will affect will cause the inefficiencies. But some people say that, well, the corruption is everywhere. I can give you the names of the countries which are quite developed, but they have got the corruption as well. But I can always argue that look at Mexico and the United States. They are two bordering countries. Look at their per capita income. The difference in their per capita income. The United States is one of the most developed countries in the world, whereas the Mexico, because of the corruption, it didn't develop. Although it had a huge amount of resources. The natural resources is very rich, the Mexico. But even after having so much of resources, it did not grow as fast as the United States. And many people say that, well, it's because of the corruption. Well, yes, the corruption can be a detrimental factor to growth and development. But if you look at one of the most successful country in the Latin America is Argentina. We have got corruption there as well, and it's not a low level of corruption in Argentina. But Argentina's economy grew at a faster rate. They perform much better than any other Latin American countries in presence of the corruption. Okay. So there are debates here, okay? But in general, we know that the corruption will lower the economic growth and so on. So therefore, but if I say that even with some level of corruption, then the economy can grow, or the private sector can function better, then possibly we should allow the government to take some of the responsibilities, even if the government is a rent seeker, okay? Because the government will provide certain goods. And in providing those goods, yes, in some areas, not in all areas, in some areas, there will be some rent seeker. Some bureaucrats will become a rent seeker. And whether that is better or whether we should not have these type of institutions at all because they are rent seeker, and then the market will underperform. So that's the choice here. But the point here is, yes, we should understand that there is a rent seeking. That is the main argument against the state, why we should withdraw, or those people who supported the Washington Consensus, they say that it is an inherent characteristics of the government. Whenever you give them power, they become rent seeker. So it's better not to give them this power, okay? Whether it is licensing, quota, or exchange rate control, fixed exchange rate, and so on, okay? Because you have got the fixed exchange rate, what will happen? Then there is a black market. And if there's a black market, you find that in many developing countries where the exchange rate is fixed, it is those individuals who are working in the bank, they buy and sell dollars or the foreign currency because the market is controlled. So it is the bank officials that are involved in the black market because they have got the easy access to the foreign currency, right? So that they get involved. It's because of the price control, and it can happen in other areas as well, whether it is a taxation or something like that. Whenever these public bureaucrats, they have got this discretionary power, licensing, permits, regulations, subsidies, taxes. So all these things will create more corruption in this economy, and ultimately it will lower the return from your investment, okay? Because any rent will be part of your marginal cost. So your cost will go up. So if the revenue remains the same, your marginal return on the investment will fall. So for example, the economic advantage of owning the license could be greater than the price of the license. Okay, so because if you own the license, so what you have, the advantage that you get because of holding that license, because only few people can have that license, and that could be much higher than the price of the license. Okay, so if there's a gap, because if the license cost is nominal, but if after paying the bribe or the kickbacks, if you think that your economic gain will be much higher because you will be the only owner, or you will be the only importer of oil, you will be the only importer of arms and ammunition, so you got the license from the government. Okay, and you know that the government is fighting, there is a civil war in the country, so the government will give license to 4 or 5 companies to import arms and ammunition from abroad. So it's a huge power given to you. So it's not just the license cost, it is that economic gain that you get out of it will much higher. So that's why the option or the rent will exist. And the government may also the government will try to protect the interest of the certain groups, because in the, 10 minutes ago I said that why we need government? Because the markets will always fail to protect certain individuals who may not be part of the market mechanism, but they should be also protected, they should be supported by the state. But then again, if you allow the state to do the job, the state can do exactly the same thing. So the market, of course the market will favor the capitalist, let's say, okay? And if you allow the government to do the job, you will find exactly the same thing. Again, the state also can favor the capitalists, the rich people, the politicians, the businessmen, but they have got it's the same identity, the political person, businessman, and capitalist, they are the same people basically. So these groups like the politicians, brokers, the employees of the state-owned enterprises, okay? So the government may care about these groups rather than achieving the social welfare goal, which is the reduction in inequality and poverty. Okay? So the government also may fail in the sense that the poverty and inequality may not go down significantly, even if the state does the job. And because these beneficiary groups, like the politicians, brokers, and the state-owned sector employees, they have got this vested interest in keeping such policies in place and make the reform difficult. So this is one of the reasons why the privatization is not taking place. Although we know that the privatization is better, it's because of this, okay? Because they slow down. They have got vested interest. They will use all their powers, whether brokers, managers, employees, they will try to prevent this privatization to happen. Okay? So although economically or practically also, maybe they are better, privatization could be a good answer for many activities or many sectors in the developing countries, but still the privatization is not taking place in those areas as well. For example, manufacturing. There is no reason to believe that the manufacturing or the production activities under the market mechanism will always be better. The market in the manufacturing activities, in the production activities will always be better. We know that. But still, in many sectors, you find that still the government is doing the job inefficiently. Okay? So it's because of this vested interest group. So the problem here is that, well, how to decide whether the government will do A, B, C, or the government will do A, B, C, D, or where should the government stop? The problem is when you allow the government will always overstep. The government will say, well, if you ask me to import oil, because giving license to someone to import oil will make the market volatile or give him or her a huge power. If you're asking me to import oil, then why don't you trust me to have the petrochemical industry? So then they go to the petrochemical industry. Then they said, okay, I should set up the chemical industry. I should set up the pharmaceutical industry. I should go for, let's say, fertilizer industry. Why? Because fertilizer is a very vital ingredient or input for agriculture. And to support my farmers, I have to, the state should produce all the fertilizers in the country. In many countries, the fertilizer is produced by the state-owned enterprises, which are definitely inefficient. So therefore, it becomes quite difficult where we should draw the line. And in most cases, you will see that the government will overstep. And by overstepping, what they do, they will correct some of the market failures. Let's say in market A and B, there are market failures. They will correct the market failures in A and B, but when they overstep in markets like C, D, E, then they will make those markets inefficient. Okay? So they will make some more efficient market, they will make some efficient market inefficient by over-regulation or overstepping. Okay? So on the whole, we can say that the poor public sector governance, due to the regulatory weakness and the policy failures and the incompetence, corruption and the cronyism. So these are the reasons why the public sector or the state-owned enterprises, they are failing, they are inefficient. It's because of this. They are really incompetent. There are policy failures amongst the various agencies of the government, and there is a corruption, there is a cronyism. So ultimately, everything will end up with a state failure or the government failure.